He crossed the wire at Belmont Park on the 6th of June 2015, 5.5 lengths clear of the field, in front of 90,000 people and 22 million more watching at home. 37 years of history said this almost never happens. The broadcasters called it the biggest coronation the sport had seen in a generation. Yet the two men the cameras found first, Bob Baffert with his fist in the air, Victor Espinoza weeping in the saddle, were not living this moment for the first time. Baffert had stood at this exact wire chasing this exact prize twice before, and lost both times. Espinoza had stood here chasing it too, only 1 year earlier, and lost by a nose he never saw coming. So what did the cameras actually miss the day American Pharoah won the Triple Crown? Another finish line, on this same ground, 13 years old, where these same two men had already lost, together. The story begins not at Belmont in 2015, but on a breeding farm in Kentucky on Groundhog Day 3 years before. American Pharoah was foaled on the 2nd of February 2012 at Stock Place Farm in Lexington, Kentucky. Bred and owned outright by Ahmed Zayat out of a mare named Little Princess Emma. His sire, Pioneer of the Nile, had chased his own Kentucky Derby 6 years earlier and lost it by 6 3/4 lengths to a 50-1 shot named Mind That Bird. The son carried that unfinished business in his blood before he ever saw a starting gate. He nearly never got the chance to settle it. A month before the Fasig-Tipton yearling sale in Saratoga, in August of 2013, the colt picked up a small blemish on his ankle, about the size of maybe 2 marbles, in the words of consignor Mark Taylor, who watched buyers notice it and back away. Zayat had told his bloodstock agent, David Ingordo, to buy the colt back at any price under the $1 million reserve if the bidding fell short. It fell short. The hammer came down at the bare minimum, $300,000, for a horse Zayat now owned twice. The name came almost as an afterthought, and it came wrong. In January of 2014, Zayat's racing stable ran a fan contest to name the yearling, and the winning entry arrived typed as Pharaoh instead of Pharaoh. Justin Zayat, the owner's son, filed the paperwork exactly as it was submitted, typo and all, and the Jockey Club registered it without blinking, the way it registers thousands of names a year without a second look. Nobody involved thought much of it at the time. A colt bought back from his own sale, at the bare minimum price, carrying a misspelled name nobody had actually chosen on purpose, is not where anyone expects a legend to start. Most yearlings who fit that description never run a single stakes race, let alone leave Saratoga's sale ring as anything more than a footnote in a catalog nobody reprints. Nobody watching his debut would have guessed at any of that inheritance. On the 9th of August, 2014, at Del Mar, the 7-5 favorite could not stand still in the paddock. He fretted through the post parade, fretted loading into the gate, ears pinned at every camera click and every voice raised too close to the rail, and ran like a colt fighting his own skin from the first jump, finishing 5th, more than 9 lengths behind the winner, never once settling into the stride that would define him a year later. Baffert called it flatly afterward. A complete disaster, he said. Everything that could have gone wrong absolutely did. A trainer with decades in the game does not need a diagnosis handed to him twice. The unraveling had a shape Baffert recognized from other barns, other years. A colt with talent to spare, undone by nothing more complicated than the noise pressing in from every direction of a crowded paddock. Bloodlines like this one do not usually come undone by sound alone, which is exactly what made the 5th place finish sting. The diagnosis, once he found it, was almost embarrassingly simple. The colt could not stand the world pressing in on him from every side. Off came the blinkers that had been narrowing his world to a tunnel of sound, doing nothing but making the noise at the edges feel louder by contrast. In went a pair of earplugs, packed in tight enough to blunt the grandstand roar without blinding him to his own footing. In came a new rider for the very next start, a jockey named Victor Espinoza, brought in less for tactics than for a fresh pair of hands the colt hadn't already learned to distrust. Yet 25 days later, blinkers gone, earplugs in, American Pharoah ran the Del Mar Futurity in a straight line, gate to wire, and won it by 4 3/4 lengths over a colt named Calculator. 25 days, one debut disaster to one authoritative win, with nothing changed about the horse except what he could and couldn't hear. The backstretch had a new word for him by the following morning. Not disaster, contender. From there, the record built the way records are supposed to build. 3 weeks after Del Mar, he beat Calculator again by 3 1/4 lengths in the frontrunner stakes at Santa Anita. Then, in late October, a deep bruise to the left front foot, the kind that ends seasons quietly, cost him the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and put him on the sidelines for close to 5 months. The voters made him champion 2-year-old anyway, by the narrowest of margins, 126 votes to 111 over a colt named Texas Red. Farrier West Champagne built a thin aluminum plate to protect that same bruised foot, and it rode under his shoe through every single start that followed, invisible to the 22 million people who would eventually watch him run on it live at Belmont, a repair nobody in the grandstand would ever think to look for. He came back in March of 2015 and won the Rebel Stakes on a sloppy track by 6 1/4 lengths. Then the Arkansas Derby by 8, running through mud and then through the entire field like both were the same ordinary problem to solve. Baffert, watching him grow into himself with every start, called it a 1-2 punch, the kind of form that turns a promising colt into a horse people start building sentences around before they've earned the right to. Then came the Kentucky Derby itself, the 2nd of May, 18 horses at the gate, the largest field he had ever faced, and the first that did not simply concede the race to him on class alone. He won it by a single length over a colt named Firing Line, his narrowest margin of the entire campaign, run at odds of 2.9 to 1, his first genuine fight since the blinkers came off. For the length of that stretch run, the horse who had beaten Calculator by 4 lengths and the Arkansas Derby field by 8 found himself matched, stride for stride, by an animal that refused to fold. He won anyway. That start, more than any of the wider margins before it, was the one that told the backstretch he could take a real fight and still be standing at the wire first. 2 weeks later, at the Preakness, a violent storm broke over Pimlico minutes before post time. Thunder rolling over the infield, rain turning the track into the last genuinely sloppy Preakness surface anyone would see for years. The kind of footing that has ended more than one favorite's campaign in the time it takes to leave the gate. American Pharoah drew the rail, post position 1, a spot no horse had won the Preakness from since 1994, a statistic trainers had learned to treat as a genuine curse rather than a coincidence. It did not matter. He led at the quarter pole, led at the half, led every single step to the wire. 7 lengths clear at the end, a margin tied for the 6th largest in the race's long history. Espinoza rode the entire stretch run without ever raising his whip. "I couldn't see how far I was in front," he said afterward, "because there was so much water in my eyes." 3 weeks after that came Belmont, the 6th of June, post position 5, the same gate Seattle Slew had broken from on his own way to the Triple Crown back in 1977. The Belmont Oval runs a quarter-mile longer than most American racetracks, a distance built specifically to expose any horse whose speed outruns his stamina, and it had done exactly that to Baffert's 2 previous Triple Crown hopefuls, both of whom had looked unbeatable right up until the moment this same extra furlong found them out. American Pharoah leaned back at the bell, lost half a step in the traffic of the break, and had it back before the field had gone 20 yards, as though the hesitation had never happened at all. He led every stride after that, uncontested, extending rather than merely holding his margin down the entire length of the stretch, the gap behind him growing with every fraction called instead of shrinking the way 37 years of history said it should. 5.5 lengths at the wire, 2 minutes, 26 seconds, and 65 hundredths, the second faster time any Triple Crown winner had ever run over that distance. The final quarter mile alone run in 24 and 32 hundredths, half a second faster than Secretariat had managed his in 1973, on the same track, chasing the same 3 jewels. 90,000 people stood in the stretch and watched 37 years end in real time, and 22 million more watched it happen on television, in living rooms across a country that had stopped expecting to see this particular ending, that had watched a dozen horses arrive at this exact species of moment since affirmed, and watched all 12 come up short. That is the race the cameras showed. Yet what they did not dwell on was Belmont Park 13 years earlier, the 8th of June, 2002, when a colt named War Emblem broke from the same gates chasing the same prize, trained by the same Bob Baffert, ridden by the same Victor Espinoza. War Emblem stumbled coming out of the box, nearly went to his knees, clipped another horse, and finished 8th, 19.5 lengths behind the winner. "I thought he would fall down for sure," Espinoza said afterward. "The ground was gone underneath his feet." Baffert had already lost the Triple Crown twice before that, with Silver Charm in 1997 and Real Quiet in 1998. But War Emblem was the first time he lost it standing next to this particular jockey. It was not even Espinoza's only near miss with this exact prize. Just 1 year before American Pharoah, in the spring of 2014, Espinoza had ridden California Chrome to this same Belmont wire chasing this same Triple Crown, arriving as the heavy favorite after sweeping the Derby and the Preakness, only to finish 4th in a crowded photo, undone by a starting gate injury to the colt's foot that cost him his chance before the race had properly begun. 2 attempts, 2 different horses, 2 entirely different ways of losing the identical race in consecutive years, close enough together that the sting of the second one had barely had time to fade before the 3rd attempt arrived. By the time American Pharoah's hooves hit the Belmont dirt in 2015, Victor Espinoza was riding into his 3rd attempt at history at this exact same wire in 4 years, and Bob Baffert was riding into his 4th attempt in 18. Ahmed Zayat, an observant Orthodox Jew, could not drive on the Sabbath even to watch his own horse make history. He and his family slept in a rented trailer near the track and walked in on foot that morning, arriving at the biggest race of their lives the same way they arrived at any ordinary Saturday. The owner arrived without an engine. The trainer and the jockey arrived carrying 13 years and 2 separate heartbreaks between them, one recent enough to still ache, and nobody in the broadcast booth said a word about either one. So the cameras had the moment right. They simply framed it too narrowly, the way a broadcast of an ending always does, because the ending is the only part built to fit inside a highlight reel, and 13 years of context rarely survives the edit. This was not only a sport ending a 37-year drought. It was one trainer and one jockey closing a debt the 2 of them had opened together at this same finish line in 2002. A debt Espinoza had tried and failed to settle again just a year earlier, with a different horse entirely, and had carried separately, and then jointly in the years between.
Espinoza said it himself afterward, in the only sentence that actually needed saying.
This time, I had so much confidence in American Pharoah. That trophy caused me a lot of stress. But the third time is the charm. Baffert, a man not given to sentiment in public, kept his own answers small. There's something about this horse. He just brought it every time. He's just an enjoyment to be around. I wasn't as nervous as I usually am because I really felt I had the horse. Neither man mentioned War Emblem by name. Neither man mentioned California Chrome. Neither man had to. Two men who had spent a combined 13 years learning exactly how this particular finish line could take a horse away from them stood at it one more time. And for once, it gave one back instead. The ground this time stayed exactly where it was supposed to be, all the way to the wire.
5 months later, at Keeneland, he won the Breeders' Cup Classic by 6.5 lengths in track record time, the first horse to add that trophy to a Triple Crown in the same year, and retired 2 days after. The unfinished business his own father had left at the Derby 6 years earlier, now closed for good. The horse nobody at that Saratoga sale would pay $1 million for stands today valued at a reported $30 million in breeding rights alone. Even his name kept the joke going. A fan's typo, filed without a second thought back in January of 2014, turned Pharoah into Pharaoh, official from that day forward. When the winner's blanket was draped over him at Belmont, the embroidery read his name the correct way, spelled the way nobody had actually given him. For one horse, on one afternoon, the right spelling was the mistake. 37 years ago, the sport ran out of patience at this same finish line. In June of 2015, at that same wire, two men who had once lost there together, and one of whom had lost there again alone just a year before, finally won there together instead. Was that afternoon a sport finally rewarded, or two men finally squaring an old account 13 years in the making? Share your thoughts below. Thanks for watching.